Hello, Jess. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much for inviting me to take part in this. I'm really excited to speak with you today.
Yes. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interview you. So, friends, we have Jess here, and let me give you a short brief about her. Jess Marion is an NLP and HNLP trainer, hypnosis trainer, master coach, and master hypnotist. She has authored 11 books in the field of NLP and hypnosis and trains practitioners around the world. She holds a master degree and is former university professor in anthropology. That's interesting. Just so, how come, being a trainer, NLP, hypnosis, author, how did it all start from professor to trainer?
Well, this was years ago. I always had an interest in hypnosis and NLP, like since I was a kid, when I first learned hypnosis was a thing. And when I went to university, I was really interested in some of the kind of very traditional figures of hypnosis, like Milton Erickson, and you could say in his own right, Richard Bandler, even though he wanted hypnosis and NLP to be separate in the founding of NLP. And I was very fortunate that my library had an extensive collection of all of these books from like these luminaries in the field from the 1950s and 60s and 70s. And I just devoured them. I dived in. I loved reading these case studies and really learning about how the mind worked. When I was an undergrad, I was a dual major in religious studies and psychology, and I became very disillusioned with psychology because it was in the US, it's highly institutionalized, and they try to apply a hard science approach to something that doesn't quite map across. So I kind of put that aside. I had completed my master's degree in religious studies with a focus on the overlap between religion, culture, and public health. And then I went on to do my PhD in anthropology with a focus in medical anthropology. And I was looking at, once again, the overlap of religion, politics, economics, and public health. I worked in India for a long time, in Varanasi, working on various projects in this scope. When you do a PhD in the United States, it's very different from how you would do a PhD in other parts of the world. So to do a PhD on top of your bachelor's and on top of your master's, you have to do an additional 2 to 3 years of coursework. Then you have to pass exams, then you have to get your dissertation topic approved, then you have to do research. And on top of that, you're expected to teach and serve on committees within the department. They really want to train you to be a professor.
Okay.
At that time, I was teaching in anthropology and I was also teaching in religion. And I was an adjunct professor at Temple University. I was also an adjunct professor at the University of the Arts for a short time in Philadelphia. And it was really overwhelming. Like, I needed to do something that wasn't in this field. So I decided to take up hypnosis again. I was like, this would be a really interesting topic to dive into more deeply now that I had a bit more freedom to do so. So I did my first formal hypnosis training in 2010, 2009, somewhere in there. And then 2 weeks later, after becoming a certified hypnotherapist, I went and opened up my practice. And it was kind of a slow evolution over 5 years of kind of moving from the academic world, which I had become very disillusioned with at that time here in the States, and into getting to really help people one-on-one. At the university, there was a lot of focus on politics and having to play politics. And I went into anthropology, specifically medical anthropology, because I wanted to help people. And that was becoming more clear that that wasn't going to be the case. So I slowly transitioned into the world of hypnosis. And then after I started my practice, I became an NLP practitioner, master practitioner, trainer, and that's where I am today. Since then, I moved my practice from Philadelphia and in the US to New York City. So if you get a lot of background noise here, it's because it's New York City.
Okay, so thank you for sharing your journey. And just could you please explain what is this meta pattern or state-based change? So what is it all about, and how does this help?
Sure. So we'll start with the bigger picture of state-based change. And
Sure.
this is the overt principle in HNLP, humanistic neuro-linguistic psychology. And that's working with the body, coaching the body, because emotions live here. They don't live here. Our thoughts live here. But our mind doesn't live here. Our mind lives in the body and outside of the body, and we experience emotions in the body. So in state-based work, what we're doing is we're working specifically with the experience of emotional states. We're not so much interested in the story that holds the state in place. We'll listen for it because the story will give us information about how the client is doing the problem. But at the end of the day, change won't happen if we don't work with states, if we don't work with emotional states. So the state-based approach is to go directly to that instead of kind of relying on, well, let's do a bunch of stuff and hope it sticks. So within that, we have the meta pattern, and the meta pattern is the structure of all change, regardless of discipline, regardless of lineage or school that you learned from. It's also the structure of influence. It's everywhere. And the basic structure is this. Feeling a problem, experiencing a problem, stepping outside of the problem, stepping into a resource, experiencing that, and bringing the resource back to the problem so it's changed. And this is a fundamental human thing. If you look across all cultures, the stories that persist on follow this structure. If you look at Western fairy tales, Cinderella, she is being tormented by her stepsisters and her stepmother. She feels awful. She steps back. She gets the fairy godmother who gives her all these gifts. She goes to the ball, falls in love with the prince, then leaves the ball, loses her shoe. The prince comes back and marries her. You could take the Ramayana. Sita is kidnapped. She's taken to Lanka. Hanuman and Rama go to save her. They bring her back. They go to war, and then everybody returns back to Ayodhya happy. This is the human structure of how we interact with problem and problem resolution. So that's the big picture. If you look at like political candidates, at least here in the States, you'll always like see this this same structure in terms of political ads and how they talk. The politician will say, "We have a problem here," and then they'll list the problem, and everybody will go, "Yeah, we don't want this." Then the politician says, "We don't have to have this problem anymore. We don't have to live this way." And people go, "Oh, that sounds good." And the politician says, "We can do this, this, and this to solve this problem." Great. And I'm the person to do it for you. So now we have the collapse. In change work, in coaching, and in therapy, it's the same thing. The client brings in a problem. They feel it in their body. I don't know. I have a fear of flying. I think about getting on the plane and I feel really afraid. And it's a visceral thing. I don't, by the way, it's just an example. So then they come to the coaching, they talk about it, they feel the state. We need the client to feel the emotion long enough so that we know how they're doing it. Like, what are they doing inside and what are they experiencing outside? In order to feel bad. So for example, with fear of flying, it might be the client feels fine until they go to book their ticket, and then terror. They book the ticket and then they play a movie of like lots of terrible things happening, which in all honesty, if I play those movies, I'd be afraid too. And then they feel bad. So it's kind of a broad structure. So in the session, we elicit that, then we have to get them out of it. We light it up in their neurology because that neural network needs to be active to begin to create the change, but we need to pull them out of it because if they're feeling really bad, it's difficult to get them to feel resourceful. We do a state break. This could be anything. This could be telling a story. This could be standing up and moving the body. This can be just a conversation about what their plans are coming up. Whatever we need to do to help them kind of allow the emotions to settle a bit. We know even when the emotions settle, because of the research into memory consolidation and reconsolidation, that once the problem is active in the first place, it's chemically unlocked in the brain. So we can change it even if they're not feeling it anymore. Once they're more neutral, then we're going to associate the client into a resource state. We want them to feel really good. And that resource state is going to depend on what their outcome is. It's going to depend on what they want. And the resource state needs to be as robust as the problem state. So it needs to be a strong resource state. That doesn't mean it has to be high energy, but they need to have a full body experience of it.
Okay.
And there's lots of different ways to associate someone into a resource state. This is where like the HNLP training comes in. Once they're in the resource state, as they're feeling good, we're going to reintroduce them to the trigger for the problem state and notice how their experience is different. Okay. And we will do this over and over and over again throughout a session. It's not one iteration, because one iteration would not be enough. But each iteration, the client will give us new information about what they're experiencing and what the problem, how the problem has changed. So then we just, once again, dissociate from the problem, associate into the resource, take the resource back to the trigger until the problem dissolves. So that's the state-based approach and the meta pattern, the structure of all change, all influence. If you're not doing this approach, if you're a traditional hypnotherapist, you're doing this too. A client comes in, they tell you what the problem is. If you do a trance induction, that's incredibly dissociative. They're going to step out of the problem. That's step 2 of the meta pattern. You load them up with great suggestions. So you have step 3, and then you do the testing. Great. Now what happens when you think about the situation? And they go, I feel so much better. So you're doing this anyway. It's just about whether we consciously realize it or not. In the HNLP world, the meta pattern also has, I don't like pattern as a word because it kind of misleads, because we use the word pattern a lot in NLP. Yeah. So the meta structure does have a conversational pattern attached to it if you want to be very overt, and that's called the coaching pattern, where you will conversationally move somebody through the meta pattern. But just know that if you're getting success with your clients, I guarantee you're using the meta pattern, whether you recognize it or not.
Okay, thank you. That was wonderful. And just, I have heard about chemistry lab, physics lab, language lab. What is this mind lab all about?
The mind lab is a lot of fun. And it's a similar idea, a sense of experimentation. This actually started back in 2013, 2014, I think. My business partner, colleague, and friend, Sean Carson, started it as a class that he told once a month, where he would just present something totally new, something he created, something he was playing with clients, to kind of push the push the edges of the map out to see what was possible. So come in for a couple hours, you teach some new content. We would experiment with taking these principles and applying them to a piece of change work. In the 2021 iteration of it, we're now doing it online, and it's a similar thing. Now I'm also teaching it with Sean. So each month, one of us will be teaching something new. And it's kind of twofold. It's fun for us because it pushes us to be creative, and it forces us as trainers outside of our comfort zone. We're teaching stuff that we don't know how the audience is going to receive it. So we get to have a similar experience as everybody who's attending the Mind Lab, who might go, I don't know what's going on.
Awesome.
But what comes out of that, because we'll bring an idea and people will discuss it, people will bring questions, we'll experiment. What comes out of that is new content, new patterns, new techniques. So the Mind Lab is really a community of experimentation, where we'll bring an idea, we'll bring something we're playing with, and then all of us will play with it and see what happens. Sometimes the content that we bring, I might have in my head that it's going to turn out one way, but based on how people interact with it, it totally turns things around. In the past, in the original iteration of Mind Lab, we had a lot of techniques that we still use that came out of it. In fact, the book that we have, the kind of fun picture book, Hypno Games for Hypno Junkies, came out of a Mind Lab of just fun trance games you could play pretty much at a party or with clients. Some of our DTI patterns came out of Mind Labs. So it's great for us. It keeps our eye on the prize, if you will. It forces us to be creative, and it's fun for everybody because you get to do something that isn't like written down like in the big stone slab of NLP, and it shows that, you know, NLP, hypnosis, these are not stagnant things. NLP, it was never meant to be a closed system. Bandler defined it as, one of the definitions was a wanton sense of curiosity and experimentation that leaves behind a trail of techniques. And that's the mind map.
Awesome. And what is the difference between regular NLP and HNLP? Yes.
Sure. So regular NLP, you know, it as it is today, became standardized over the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. Bandler and Grinder and some of the first generation NLPers, Gilligan, Dilts, those guys, were all experimenting in the 70s and 80s, trying out new things. Like, you know, people ask, what's the difference between an NLP master prac and an NLP prac? Like, ooh, the master prac content must be more difficult. No, it was because Bandler and Grinder just decided after one course they wanted to teach another course, and they said, ooh, we'll call this master prac. Oh. But what happened was NLP kind of became a religion, in that it was like if you deviated from the foundation that was laid in the 70s and 80s, oh, well, that's not NLP anymore. So unfortunately, in some circles, how NLP is taught today is the same way it was taught in the 70s and 80s. Well, we as a species have evolved beyond that over the last, 30, 40 years. So NLP as it is today in the very traditional form, and this is like, there's lots of trainers who experiment and are super flexible. So I'm just kind of speaking in broad strokes here. NLP as it is today, or as it's often taught, is as a kind of step-by-step cookbook of techniques to use with clients. Okay. And it's like, okay, now it's time to do the visual squash. Put this on this hand, put this on this hand. Well, you don't have to do a squash that way. Or now it's time to do a swish. Uh-oh, do you put it out on a slingshot, or do you zoom in and zoom out? Who knows? I mean, it becomes very kind of step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And if you deviate, then it's a problem. Humans don't work like this. In the 1970s, the model of the human brain was that it was a computer. And at that time, especially Bandler treated it as such. The idea was that, okay, well, if the mind's a computer, the brain's a computer, then you just need certain lines of code to optimize its performance. Okay. Yeah. The problem with that is that neither the brain or the human being is a computer. The closest, most accurate metaphor we have for the brain is a rhizome, which is like the root system that nourishes bamboo and mushrooms and mint. So this interconnected system without a taproot. It's not a computer. Humans are nonlinear. We do not go step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Yay, I'm fixed. I mean, that might work in an NLP class because people have been indoctrinated. But like out in the wild, coaching people, it doesn't always work that way. So what do you do? So this is where HNLP comes in. HNLP is going to apply the state-based approach. So we're no longer programming the computer. Instead, we're working with the body. So we're going to take the traditional NLP patterns, which do follow the meta pattern, almost all of them. Mm-hmm. And we're going to ground that in the embodied experience, what the client is feeling. What the client is feeling, what their physiology is showing us. So we're paying way more attention to their tonality versus the words and their physiology. And we're going to be coaching that throughout the entire coaching process within HNLP. It's all about what's happening right now in this moment, not what happened 2 steps before. Okay. And what is the body showing us? Because the body will show us and tell us what the next step is. So we might start with the idea that we'll use like a swish or something. And sometimes you'll do the whole thing, like as it's written, as it's codified in the system of NLP, and it works great. Yeah. But when it doesn't, when it breaks down, HNLP steps in and gives us the flexibility to start to play, to start to think as nonlinear people together in a system. So that's kind of the broad HNLP view. Then there are certain techniques, certain approaches that are specific to HNLP. I mentioned the coaching pattern. There's something called a foreground background switch. There are other kind of patterns that do have steps. We don't mind patterns with steps as long as we know how to use them.
Yeah.
That are specific to HNLP, that when we teach an NLP/HNLP class are also layered in. We also, in our approach to NLP, especially in our trainings, we've kind of pared down some of the things that we know work really well, especially like maybe within an American context, because most of our students, not all, but most of our students are US based. We might take some things out that we go, you know what, this isn't going to work for this audience. So it's about flexibility. HNLP also has certain presuppositions that aren't included in traditional NLP. We include all the NLP presuppositions, like the map is not the territory, behind every behavior is a positive intention, all that great stuff. And then we add in things like memory is a creative, reconstructive process. All you are is changing.
Okay.
As humans, we don't stay the same. When a client calls for a session, or we do a consultation before doing a piece of change work, when that client talks about the problem for the first time with us versus when they actually come in for the piece of change work, that problem will have changed. They will have changed.
Yes.
So another presupposition is all you are is changing. Reality is a construction. That's one of my favorites.
Yes.
We like to think what we think is reality, but it's not. So we play with that as well.
Beautiful. So this has been always my question, just like, of course, the NLP was popular in 70s and 80s, but a lot of things have evolved since then. And what is happening in the latest scenario in the field of NLP? And thank you for giving that update. And also what I liked is that human brain doesn't work like a computer. It is not a computer. It is different. So thank you for clarifying. And I also noticed in your website that you're offering a course on hypnotic coaching. So on one side, this is hypnosis, and another side, this is coaching. So how come both have been blended? And what is so unique about that? Yes.
Right. So our approach to coaching is going to be slightly different than something like ICF. Yeah. You can certainly easily apply hypnosis to things like accountability coaching, and it will make life a lot easier. But with hypnotic coaching, once again, we're grounding it in the body. Okay. If you have a conversation with somebody's body, if you're calibrating to their state and you're doing things to elicit states and their physiology is showing it, that is automatically hypnotic.
Okay.
The conscious mind, we like to think it's up here because of our sense organs, or our main sense organs are here. But most of the body is the territory of the unconscious mind. We can't consciously control when we blush unless we focus on our breathing. Most of the time, we're not consciously tracking it. We're not even consciously aware of the gestures that we use. We might know, like, I know I'm using gestures right now, but I don't plan it out. I have no idea what my unconscious mind is choosing to use to express this to you. So in hypnotic coaching, just like with state-based coaching, we're having this conversation with the body. We're going to be then layering in on top of that things like values work, or working with meta programs, working with some more of like kind of these bigger coaching themes. So in hypnotic coaching, you'll still get clients who come in for like quit smoking, kind of the typical hypnosis stuff. But with those clients, I tend to just do classical hypnosis because it works really well. Yeah. But I do get a lot of clients who want these bigger life changes, who want to step more authentically into who they are, to really get in touch with their core, their deep values. And that's where hypnotic coaching comes in, because if we're speaking to the body, if we're using hypnotic language, so we don't necessarily need to do an overt transinduction, although we might, just depends on the client and the situation in that session. we can conversationally elicit trance to sidestep a lot of the interference the critical faculty introduces into the discussion, and help them to really get more in touch with the deeper layers of who they are.
Wow. And just to get trained in this hypnotic coaching certification that you are offering, is it mandatory to have previous knowledge of NLP?
Right. So currently, I think you might have seen an older page. We actually haven't set any dates yet for another hypnotic coaching course this year because things are a little bit busy coming into 2021. Typically, how it goes, if you want to be a hypnotic coach, you're going to need to have a hypnotherapy certification
Already.
Yeah, and we highly recommend being an NLP practitioner. Because if you're not, it makes it really difficult if you're not accustomed to the language that the jargon us NLPers like to use.
Yes.
It's really helpful. Typically, we offer the hypnotic coaching and NLP, HNLP master practitioner as a dual certification. So most of our students are master practitioners. If someone wanted to do it who doesn't come from the HNLP school, in the past, what we've done is we've given them like a lot of videos to watch prior to attending the training,
right,
to kind of catch them up.
Okay. And how effective is online training when it comes to learning NLP or HNLP, Jess?
It's very effective. It's not the same, full disclosure, it's never going to be the same as in person. But it's the same with coaching. If you do coaching or hypnosis via Zoom, it's not the same as being in the same space with the client. But that's not a problem.
Okay.
So it's going to be slightly different, but it's highly effective. You have in our online trainings, we typically do it a few weekends a month from like 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it consists of a teaching segment, sometimes a demo part with students, and then breakout rooms where people get to go and experiment and do exercises. And we also integrate in practice nights, also evenings. So practice nights, people will come in and just practice whatever they want to do. It's kind of an opportunity for people to do therapy, to do change work with each other and practice the things that they learned the weekend before. We also do nights where we'll show a video of a piece of change work and we'll pause it and kind of break things down so people get to understand the coaching process. And this is something like these nights were a little bit more difficult to actually do in person because, our audience is spread out all over.
Okay.
So to be able to do it online makes it easy. People don't have to travel so much. We do have people from lots of different parts of the country who attend our training. We have people from the UK who attend our trainings. We've had people in Hong Kong and China as well, although they came in person. So if we had the Zoom option prior, it probably would have made their lives easier.
Yeah.
So it's very effective.
Yes, and I observed that just as hypnotic coaching is taught in person only, is that like thing, or can a person learn online as well?
You can absolutely learn online.
Online, both.
So what we've done for all of our courses, NLP, hypnosis, hypnotic coaching, is because working online is different from working in person. When we teach things, we have to kind of talk about and show, okay, well, these are the things if you were face-to-face that you're going to pay attention to. Okay. Here are the things that make a difference working online. For example, there is something called visual capture, which is created from Zoom or any computer screen, where it forces our conscious focus down into this narrow space. This also elevates beta brainwaves, so it's not very conducive for trance, for the types of trances we typically want to elicit. It also causes more activity in the critical faculty, the default mode network. So understanding that, we need to do things to help ease that. Okay. To kind of step out of the visual capture, also because of COVID, lots of people are used to doing work on Zoom now, so we need to help them to separate out the anchors for work from what we're going to be doing together. Also, the things that you might calibrate for on Zoom are going to be somewhat different than in person because you might not always see the gestures, for example.
Yes.
So there are small changes, but once it's addressed, it's very easy to navigate, and it also gives students a second skill because it is a skill to work on Zoom. It's also another skill to work on phone, which I do sometimes as well. So it lets them practice an additional skill set that's going to create greater freedom in their practice. So I think in some ways, learning on Zoom has benefits that learning in person does not.
Yes, awesome. And just let's say a person has from Germany, someone is from UK, someone is from India, and they have learned hypnosis, hypnotherapy, clinical hypnosis, like name anything. There are different names, but the same course.
Yeah.
Yet someone after a point might feel that there's something one has to enhance skills. Like let's say there have been some challenging clients, or a person has been, let's say I have never worked with alcohol addiction or quit smoking. I have with relationship and other stuff. So that's where the importance of mentoring comes. And what is your perspective of course, you are a mentor, yet, usually I'm asking you, like, can people from who have been trained elsewhere also take your mentoring?
Yes, and you've raised some really good points about mentoring, because there's different types of mentoring.
Okay.
There is the very context specific mentoring where it's like, okay, I want to, I want to work with smokers and I don't know how. I want to work with alcoholics and I don't know how. In those instances, you want to seek out people who are highly skilled in that area, and be very careful when you do this, because it's very easy to fall for the glossy marketing.
Okay.
So you need to actually speak with them. You might want to read client testimonials. You might want to listen to what other people in the field are saying about this person and their success in that specific field. And then seek them out for mentoring. Oh. They might do it, or they might say, well, I have a class or I have a product. It just depends. We have a fantastic stop smoking protocol, and some people in the past I've mentored, and I find that personally, that very context-based mentoring a little bit more difficult, because you really need to practice the skills. And if it's one-on-one, there's nobody for the mentee to practice with, and they're not going to want to practice with you because they get like a little bit nervous, which is totally understandable. So in that case, I might say, hey, check out this program, this book. You can read our reviews online. You can see our client testimonials and make your choice. That's one type of mentoring, and that tends to be very short term. There are broader types of mentoring. So kind of the next level out, the next kind of level out of mentoring that I do are for clients who want to write a book or want to teach their first class or put together a program for the first time. So that's going to be mentoring on, how to do it like how we've done it, which is not the only way to do it, but it's the way I know how to do it. But also wrapped into that mentoring, there's typically emotional hurdles. There is state-based emotional coaching that has to happen, because if a mentoring client hasn't taken the steps to sit down and write the book, like just do a brainstorm or just type chapter 1, the heading, that's it. And they haven't done that, why not? And throughout the mentoring process, they will typically come up against emotional roadblocks that were the real reason why in the past they didn't complete the process. It's not that they didn't know how, or not that they couldn't figure it out. It's that what was happening underneath was kind of buried down deep, and all of this other stuff was piled on top as the justification. So once we clear that, then the mentoring takes more of a coaching turn, which is awesome, because then that's when you have breakthroughs. Okay. Then we have this even broader scope of mentoring, which is continuous mentoring for practitioners who just want to get better at what they're doing, or who want a third person perspective. There's a lot of value in kind of circulating through the perceptual positions as coaches. We spend most of our time in first position. We spend our time as the coach working with clients. Well, as Gregory Bateson once said, Never really know something until you know it from at least 3 different perspectives. Or you might have said 4, but you get the idea. So if you spend all of your time just as a coach or just as the hypnotist, you're really cutting yourself off from a lot of growth and a lot of potential in your life and in your professional life. So in this broader scope, that allows the client to bring what's happening in sessions and ask for advice, ask for feedback, ask for supervision. So now they're getting a 3rd person perspective. They're introducing new information into that system.
Okay.
Sometimes it means we'll review a technique, or the mentoring client will bring in case notes and say, well, look, I did this, this, and this, and this happened, and I don't know why it happened. Or how can I make this better? And we can talk about it. And this isn't to say that I have all the answers, because I certainly don't. But it's about having that outside perspective that says, hey, have you considered it from this point of view? And, speaking about the perceptual positions, this is something that, I tell all of my students. It's really important too, if you are going to be a change worker, if you're going to coach people, if you're going to be a hypnotist, you need to spend time as a client. And you need to spend time as a client with different people. Because first of all, it's going to give you a kind of a sense of who you are as a coach, as a therapist. It's going to give you a greater understanding of what are the strengths that you bring that are different from other people, which is really good. It's going to let you clear up your own emotional stuff that's happening, because let's face it, we are nonlinear systems and we are not perfect. Any coach who says, or any therapist who says that their life is totally together or that they can't be hypnotized, that's my favorite one. If they say that, run away. Do not see them as a coach. And this also will expand your skill set, especially if you work with someone who's kind of outside of your lineage. Inside the lineage is really good. It's going to refine your skills without a doubt. Outside the lineage, it's going to bring in new information. It's going to broaden your therapy map. You'll find yourself in sessions beginning to integrate new approaches. And, finally, this gives us as hypnotists, it gives us a lot of empathy for what it's like to be a client and how difficult it can be for clients to come in and share this stuff that they've held close to their heart for a really long time. So it teaches us another level of empathy and gives us a greater respect for how challenging it can be to sit on the other side of that equation. So I don't know if that answers the question. I kind of wanted to answer.
Yes. I was just listening. The importance of mentoring, because I've seen 2 years ago, 3 years ago, someone has completed some certification and just continuing. It's like the importance of mentoring comes into the picture to fine tune the skills, know what's happening, expand their toolkit, skill set, and also thank you for emphasizing that the coaches or therapists should also go through a certain process of being client as well, because it helps them personally and also understand from the client's perspective.
Yeah, and I would recommend too, if you have the opportunity to have supervision.
Okay.
And to have a very specific type of supervision, if it's available to you, is to have real-time supervision where the coach works with a client. It doesn't have to be a client, it can be a colleague, because I know some clients don't want that intrusion. That's fine. But the coach spend time coaching, and the person who's supervising is going to coach the coach through the process of change work. So to point out things that maybe the coach didn't think about, or to step in and maybe do a dual induction with the coach. What this does is this creates a positive part. This creates a parts installation. So if you have a mentor and they're willing to do this and they know how to do it, this is the thing, is it's kind of a difficult thing to do for the mentor, because they have to keep their ego out of it. But if you have that opportunity, definitely take it, because you are going to skyrocket your skill set in a very short period of time.
And it saves years of research, investment, time, many things.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just it was wonderful talking to you and to know about what's happening in the field of NLP hypnosis and importance of mentoring and this was very beautiful to see coaching and hypnosis being blended. And I also loved how adapting to the online from face to face working and how you are bringing those skills also, which are specific to working online with the client. So very amazing information I had now, and I hope the audience and the fellow coaches, therapists who are watching this will be benefited. And just I will be sharing your website and other related URL. So friends who are interested in HNLP or getting trained in hypnotic coaching, etc., please, or else want to be mentored, reach out to Jess.
Thank you so much. This was so lovely and such an honor to get to meet you face to face versus just Facebook posts, which I love your posts, by the way. And it's a real honor to get to speak to my colleagues in India. Sometimes the coaching world, we're kind of very separate, like in our own little sphere. So I love these opportunities to meet new people and to talk shop. So thank you so much for extending this invitation. It's been wonderful.
It's wonderful talking to you too. Thank you very much, Jess.
Thank you. Bye.